Sorry.
It's all right. A few different things that we're looking at, and I think there are some things that we could look at that haven't necessarily been discussed yet. But um, so what you've gotten has been a back testing of what the school department has said is their current methodology for forecasting enrollment. That's sort of separate from the other two. There is a set of documents that was provided to me by uh, the chair of the school committee that shows the floor plans of the individual elementary school buildings and the use of individual spaces within those buildings. Classrooms are identified K or 1 through 5 generally. Some schools have 6, 7, and 8 broken out separately. Others sort of say, well, this room is for 6th and 7th, the social studies, or this is for 7th and 8th science. And so a bunch of them are sort of like mixed up together. And if you, because I don't really focus on homerooms the way that K through 5 does, which is every child goes into a room and that's the room they're in all day long. Middle school is completely different. But if you sum up all those different rooms and you divide them by 3 grades, they more or less come out to what you see on the spreadsheet. It's generally 3 or 4, 5. It's divisible by an even number. And so the purpose of what I did on that incomplete spreadsheet that I sent was to go and identify each of the rooms that the school said were being used, to see whether or not there were any empty rooms, and if so, if they had been identified. And also, probably the most interesting thing that I found out about this, found out with looking at these documents, is how much space is used for other functions. And I'll get to that in a minute. Each of these set of floor plans, the information did not come from someone in central office. My understanding is that the floor plans were given to the principals of each individual school, and the principals filled out the information that you see on each document. So I do encourage you to take a look at some of them and get at least a cross section and recognize how much space is being used for special education, ELL services, OT services, occupational therapy, physical therapy. There are world language classes, classrooms. There are a number of different classrooms that are specified for what I guess you call individual uses as opposed to broad classroom uses. They take up a lot of space, and I presume that the newer buildings were designed with some of those spaces in mind. I don't know that those spaces were thought about when some of the older buildings were designed, and if they were not needed, whether or not there would be a different way that the public schools of Brookline would be allocating students to a particular school. I can't answer that. I have not asked that question. I'm not sure it's particularly relevant at this point in time, because the availability of specialized classrooms is obviously a fact of life that everyone needs to deal with, particularly as it relates to special needs children. And you can see the offices are laid out, identified. There are some places that have some specific rooms for after school uses. There's some that have specific rooms for pre-K that are identified. but as it relates to K through 8, my sense is that what we are seeing is, pretty consistent with what people have been sort of informed is the classroom availability for regular education classes, for lack of a better term. The one exception to that right now is Driscoll, where there are 6 regular education classrooms that are vacant. They've been identified. There actually is a 7th that does not have a specific use being associated with it. I'm going to ask Val about that particular room, because my expectation is that it was just mislabeled by the, it's not labeled as anything, it's not labeled as empty, it's not labeled as a particular use. I think it is being used in the same manner as the room next to it, and the principal, when they were filling out or drawing arrows, just did not complete that. It's on the 4th floor, but I will get that information back to everybody. So what do I do with this information? What do we do with this information? One of the other documents you got was a document that's called school capacity. And that document has 2 parts to it. The top part, which looks at MGT 2012, and then the current / expected capacity, is a comparison of what an outside consultant came up with back in 2012, before a number of projects were undertaken to add capacity to the school system. And the second column, obviously, is the current capacity as identified either by an architect in the case of Driscoll, which I'm going to talk to in about a minute. With regard to Pierce, it is the MSBA's stated expectation of maximum capacity children. Thank you for putting that up. For Lawrence, that is for Lawrence and Ridley, that information is coming from the school district. And in particular, if you scroll down, you will see a chart that has 3 different sets of numbers. And the one that I referenced up above for Ridley and Lawrence is the one titled Norman, August 2019. Mary Ellen Norman was a former deputy superintendent for finance and administration. She was here for quite some time. And you can see that we know that Ridley had an expansion, and it went from roughly, call it 900 kids to 950, although back in 2012, MGT said that had capacity for 752. And so that was what it was designed at originally. And then the expansion brought it up to 945. The October 1st is actually a statement of occupancy, not design capacity. And Lawrence, Mariah, you can probably help me out here. Lawrence, I assume, went through some sort of expansion, but I don't remember when that happened or what was involved in adding the classrooms. I don't know if those were some of the.
I bet you remember, Cliff. Do you remember when they basically took away the parking lot in the back? And remember the contractor went out of business or something horrible. I don't remember. Dick, you might remember this too, and other people who were around. there was some sort of drama and then they had to restart it, but it was only adding classrooms and not other building purposes. And I think that's why you see that vast discrepancy between capacity of the lunchroom times 3 and then the actual classrooms.
Great. Thank you for that, for reminding us of that. Appreciate it.
I think Sadaf wasn't a parent at Lawrence at the time, but I think Justin is also here and he was a teacher at Lawrence at the time, I believe. So many historical memories.
So, the bottom line is that there's a current / expected classroom capacity of a little over 5,500 students once, Pierce is completed. Now, the reason I said that I want to talk a little bit about Driscoll is because of.
Can you tell me again where you just said 5,500, where are you going off of that bottom number or the top number? Sorry, I'm
sorry, the top number. I added that column together. All right.
Okay.
So, go ahead. Sorry,
Dick. The interesting thing is that the most recent document that you sent around has a higher number.
Right. Okay.
And then do you have any idea of what the discrepancy is between the Norman 2019, the 2718, the 2018? The middle one is higher substantially for, I think, 3 schools, as I recall. And I'm wondering if any of them explain the assumptions that were used.
Well, so I think this table was lifted pretty much verbatim from a study that was done back in, I guess it was 2019 or 2020 by three-time meeting members, Dave Gayshock, Nathan Spritz, and Mike Toffel, when they were advocating for something. And, it was, I can't tell you about the assumptions that Mary Ellen used or that Andrew Bott used back in 2018. The 2017-2018 enrollment report, that looks to me like it was existing population, because that's an enrollment report.
Right. Okay.
So I really don't know. I don't put a heck of a lot of stock in that. I think Mary Ellen's is probably the thing that is most closely relates to what I was trying to do, because it says it says design K classrooms. I'm not exactly sure what that means. But MGT theoretically was looking at the design of the buildings at the time and making sort of a determination, or looking at what had been provided. How do I want to say this? What had been expected from the buildings at that time. I mean, I have to go back and read that report. I have not read that report in a really long time.
And Cliff, what was MGT? This is something I'm not familiar with.
I don't remember what the initials stand for, but MGT was an outside consultant that came in and took a look at the existing capacity of the school buildings, and I assume they did that because of the growth that was happening, and sort of helping to make the case that the town needed additional classroom capacity. Mariah, do you have a different remembrance, or Carla?
I think MGT might have preceded that, and I think MGT might have been the last time that we had a capital plan. Like, I think that might have been part of a routine capital plan and capital analysis, but I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at it.
And I have the link up. I just don't know how to share it in the chat, but I have a link for those who want to see the report.
I don't think you can unfortunately share it, but
Yeah, the chat isn't available.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But no, but if you make him a co-host, he can post it.
No,
no, the
it's
chat's
No?
not available no
nobody
matter
has-
what.
They don't
Really?
put the chat, on, I don't know.
But if you make him a co-host, can't he just put it on the screen?
Oh, yeah, he can put it on the screen.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if you Google MGT 2012 Brookline, it comes up on the first link, so. I think what actually happened, if I recall correctly, was MGT was the one who had done the last capital plan. I'm just reminding myself of it, doing the Google. And then as the building started to become strained, they asked MGT to come back and specifically answer this question as part of B space.
Yeah, that makes some sense.
Yeah.
So what does this tell us? What does any of this tell us? It doesn't really tell us a heck of a lot. Okay. And that's sort of something that we need to sort of discuss as to what do we want to do, or what can we do with any of this information. Ultimately, I think what it comes back to is understanding what the design capacity of the buildings are for classroom usage, not putting aside any other usage, and then looking at how those classrooms are utilized by the schools as it relates to the population that goes into each school. And, I guess building off of that, it's whether or not we're seeing schools that are so underutilized that maybe the schools should be considering doing something else in terms of allocating kids, at least new kids. So they're building to a point over time where they can more fully utilize buildings as opposed to just having buildings open. It's not, I think from a pure analytical perspective, that's the sort of analysis that you might want to take, whether or not from a philosophy or data, whether or not philosophically the schools actually want to do anything about it is a different issue. So
Can
I
you
guess
clarify, Cliff, though? That statement sounds to me like you were saying buildings are underutilized and schools should. Where is the, did I miss in all that information you presented?
Well, I
Something
think-
showing underutilization?
well, let's define what underutilization is. Okay, so let's go back to the report in March, right? Which shows,
Report in March. Oh, you're talking about the Excel sheet.
the
rainbow
enrollment
sheet.
report, right? Okay.
Okay.
So total enrollment that I have 4,660 kids. And if the capacity is going to be up around 5,500, that's roughly call it 900 seats around the town that are empty, not being utilized. And that, as a gross number, it's a school and a half, right?
So you're comparing, sorry,
let me finish.
okay, I just want to make sure I'm following what number you're looking at.
Well, I'm looking, okay, so March 2025.
Can you put up the March 6th? That was the last
That's the last thing I sent around.
document that you sent around
That's
shortly
the
before.
5832 number you're referring to?
There we go.
No, 4660.
It's down in the lower right-hand corner.
Okay.
So I appreciate that this is a projection, or this was a projection. And maybe you could go to the DESI report for that's on the DESI website, and look at how many elementary school kids are there.
Yeah, we got it, like the actual enrollment report was shared and I have it somewhere.
In this format, sections by school?
No, and not quite this pretty, but the
Right.
total number.
Right.
Yeah, it would be, I think, helpful. I assume the document is available in this format for the current actual enrollment in this school year.
That's right.
We have not gotten it yet because the last time we were presented to, which was on this topic about a month ago, Desi had not finalized they'd not approved the numbers yet. So I think we got a preliminary enrollment, but without all without that typical grid that we usually see.
But
the total that
is
was
this-
shared a
is
few
this
weeks
a-
ago. Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Mariah, is this a DESI grid or is this a,
No, this is
PS
something PSB made up, but I was just referring back to that document we usually get in late October or so that shows how many kids are in each class by each school. I presume that's what you were talking about.
what, no, actually, my question was, is this document that Cliff has put up, is the March 6th, 2025, which I assume is a projection for the current year, or is that actual as of last year? And
That was actual, I believe, for last
okay,
year.
and my question would
March.
be,
I thought it was a
is
forecast.
is there a similar document available that is more up to date? And I would think it would be, but
So there was
I-
an enrollment data that was shared, and maybe it was I mean, I thought this was the final enrollment for this year. And I'm gonna share it because I took a little screenshot of it and pasted it into this other spreadsheet that I'm working on. And this is what we got.
right,
Yeah, and so I just took a screenshot out of the deck that was shared. So I don't have the original spreadsheet, and it's a roll up by grade, by school. And this number at the elementary school level is 4565. And this was the actual enrollment data that was shared, I don't know, just a few weeks ago. I think in October sometime.
Yeah, it was like late
Okay.
October.
That's right.
okay.
Right.
Fidelity
And so the question is whether or not, if we have that data, then presumably that can be shown in terms of sections in each school, just like the March data was. And that's really kind of the question.
I think what I think where this is interesting, and this factors into some of the work that I've been doing as well around the school model question. The one of the challenges with our current 8-school structure is that your ability to optimize across classrooms fundamentally is going to be limited. Because if you are, I mean, just there are 2 grades at Lawrence that have 3 sections instead of 4 sections, right? So there's, they had small classrooms last year for those grades, and now they consolidated into 3 sections instead of 4 sections. Lawrence is typically a 4-section school across all the other grades. So you don't have an ability to easily move students around and manage to a particular class size number as easily, because your schools individually are smaller. And so one place where I think the space and the capacity analysis is relevant is around redistricting, essentially, the elementary schools to get to a closer to your target classroom size, and therefore potentially get some efficiencies in terms of the number of classrooms as a result.
Right.
So I think that's, from my point of view, the ultimate punchline potentially, and where this is interesting. As we have been thinking about the middle school model piece, that was similarly where I thought, at least from the perspective of this committee, it could be interesting if you were to redistribute, so to speak, student population. Would that gain you some efficiencies? there are other considerations as well. But from that perspective, I think that there is something there.
So Sadaf, are you looking at that question, or is
Yeah.
I'm wondering where the break point is between the work you're doing and the work that Cliff is doing?
Yeah, so I think I want to use the work Cliff is doing to make sure that I understand how many classrooms there are per school that are usable. And the reality is that if you were to do a proper analysis on a different school model, that is a very involved process that would require a consultant to look at it for 12 or 18 months to actually come up with something that you might want to consider, because there's obviously a lot of considerations. The way that I've been thinking about this is starting off to say, hey, do we think this is worth a look? Because if we were to redistribute the population in a different way, and as a result, slightly increase our class size across the district, would that result in a savings from a section perspective? And then from a cost point of view, could that be something that then warrants a closer look, right? With the understanding that there's a lot of other things to consider, and that this would be a potential efficiency fundamentally at a steady state, right? So it would take you some time to get there, but doing it in a way that would manage potential costs and transportation, costs specifically related to transportation, as well as classroom retrofitting. So those were some of the inputs or the direction that I was going in my and Val had said originally in the future subcommittee, so I'm recapping this for this group because not everybody heard this, that the PSB staff wouldn't have time to work on this until probably January or February. I chatted with Mariah and she thought that probably wouldn't be realistic just given everything else that's going on. And so I think we need to think about what we would or would not as a result put into a report if we don't have the ability to collaborate with the PSB staff because they simply have too much going on. So that's something for us to put a pin in. We'll get there when we get there and figure out what we think is viable to put in the report, given that. Mariah, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so I guess I'm still trying, like, the question that you were asking from the long-term perspective, I think is pretty clear to me. But then I'm trying to understand, and I'm losing what I thought I had understood before of what is the short-term question we're answering that Cliff's capacity and space question is answering.
So, again, from my perspective, the utility in going through this analysis, beyond what we might do with it in the future. What's the short-term utility? The short-term utility is to try for this committee to have enough understanding of where things are, how things are done, and to be able to answer questions that people have been raising and will continue to raise if we are not able to succinctly and clearly provide them with an answer to their questions. And when I say that, I mean that from the perspective of the committee as an independent voice from the public schools of Brookline, because there are enough folks out there who will trust the schools without an independent verification. So part of what this all is really it's education. It's breaking things out so that people, when I say people, I mean the people around this table or around on the committee, can see what is going on and understand it better than we do now. I
So
don't,
what is the number? Because I don't know what the answer is. What is the number that's an efficient use of the buildings or an efficient, that's what I'm still struggling with of, like, was the determination to say PSB says it's doing it, but we think we agree or we don't, and why? What is that?
I don't think I've ever heard PSB say we're efficient. We are using our buildings efficiently.
Well, I'm just trying to say, you say people believe in PSB, so whatever, putting aside what PSB says.
So you've heard, I mean, you've heard and you've read the criticisms of what has been presented to people, you know, in the spring, throughout the summer, and maybe a few weeks ago, a conversation at school committee, if people listened to it, might have answered the question if everyone was able to, if everyone gone and listened to it, as to, you know, why there aren't more empty classrooms than people thought there were, you know, given this chart. Okay, that is the type of question. I'm not making a judgment as to efficiency. I probably would make a judgment personal as to whether or not the school committee, where it often seems like you're more than willing to go to 16 kids a class or 17 kids a class, but not really willing to go to 25 or 26, you know, that's a conversation I personally would have. I would say that's being inefficient. I'm not going to make that statement for anyone else. I'm giving you my personal opinion. But I believe that if we're able to actually say, yeah, you know, we looked at the plans, we see how many classrooms there are. We see where their classrooms are not being used, and the schools are telling us they're not being used. Okay, so it's not as if there are 6 extra classrooms at Driscoll that are being used, but only have 12 kids in it. Okay, that type of thing. That is a valuable statement for the schools to have this committee and people on this committee be able to make. You know, I know that with the audience I'm going to have to talk to, those types of statements are valuable. I'm really not here to say, well, gee, your allocation shouldn't be like this.
I'm just trying to understand what the question is that this
so
headline is answering. That's what I'm still thrown off by.
So take a step back. One of the things I just said is that I'm not sure what we do with all of this data. Okay, so I'm not coming here with an assumption that I particularly have a path to go down with all these documents and all this analysis that I've done. I think it's valuable to do the back testing on the forecasting approach that the schools are taking. I think there are some pretty interesting, some immediate conclusions you can draw from it. I think that you're doing the right thing by having an outside party come and do work and not rely on, you know, internal forecasting. You know, my own perspective is that it's just a variation on live births. Okay, and so it's going to suffer from the same a trend faults that old methodology used. Going outside is the right thing to do.
Sadaf, can you, I'm sorry.
Oh, the
Go
Sid
ahead.
has his hand raised, so just, and then,
Please, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sure. I
I'm
just
done.
had
I'm
a
done.
really quick question. Thank you, Cliff, for doing this
Sure.
analysis. You mentioned that you'd identified empty rooms, and or these rooms, by and large, rooms that are classrooms, or are they rooms that need to be used for activities not classroom based?
So these are rooms. I mentioned Driscoll specifically, and you know, part of this came out of folks saying, "Well, gee, Driscoll only has what is it this year? Is it 3 sections? I don't remember. 3 sections, but it's a 4-section school. Why aren't they being, you know, what's going on?" Well, there are 6 empty classrooms identified as classrooms at Driscoll. Why are they there? I don't know. They're not designed for use beyond classrooms, but that does tell people, yeah, that school has the capacity to add, 6 more classes. So I think that it's important that people know there are actually classrooms sitting empty there. It's not a negative thing at all. It's a fact. And it's a fact that we're able to state with confidence, right, to people. One of the things that I have learned, and I find this interesting, and I'm just going to, relay it and caveat my statements with there's still more information that I need to find out. So I would not draw any real conclusions. It's just data.
I think there's also there's 2 other things I want to throw out. Actually, Dick, go ahead. You were trying to say something.
Well,
Let me just finish what I was going to say.
Sure, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So I have asked the building department to take a look at these drawings and to let me know whether or not those are the drawings that they in fact are using or have on file, right? Because I've been asked to do that. And so they are. And then there was something I heard, I think it was Dr. Givens made a comment that, Driscoll has a certificate of occupancy or whatever for 24 people in a classroom. And that sort of struck me as odd because, the classroom guidelines from the PSB are for grades beyond 2nd grade is up to 25 kids in a classroom. So that's the question I asked the building department. What's sort of going on with that? And some parents apparently in the spring wrote the building department and said, we understand that the capacity for these classrooms is 22 kids. Plus 2 adults, it's 24, right? And so why are we having classrooms of 25 kids? Which merited some additional questioning. So here's the answer. There's an architect's letter from Jonathan Levy Associates that says the building was designed for the classrooms to hold 22 children plus 2 adults. That's 24. By code, the classrooms of roughly 825 feet or 850 feet, whatever the number is, 20 feet a person. By code, you could fit 42 people in the classroom, in each classroom. Now, the head of the building department says, well, look, I need at least 60 square feet for egress in case of, people need to get out of the room. So bringing that down to a particular number of square footage, I'd only let 39 people go in there. All right. So now you have the situation where, okay, the architects say it was built for 22 kids plus 2 adults. Code says you can have up to 39. Now no one expects or would expect that the schools would ever, or anyone want schools to kind of go up that high. But my question still is, how is it that we have a stated policy of up to 25 kids in a classroom, but a certificate of inspection, that's what they're using right now, of either 24 or 25 people, which is either 22 or 23 kids. And that certificate of inspection for last year and this year for Pierce only has 32 classrooms listed.
Here's for Driscoll.
Driscoll, I'm sorry, thank you. Only 32, even though it was built for 36, at least that's my understanding. So that's information for everybody. I'm going to sit down with the building department. Mariah, it's something that I would like Carol to sit in on. Carol
Yeah.
Levin, who's head of the capital subcommittee of the advisory committee. I think someone from the school should be there, just to sort of understand everything. And it may
Jesse
just
and I would be
be,
interested, I think,
Yeah.
if you're willing to invite us.
yeah, it's not a question, am I willing to? I think it's,
Yeah.
you should be there. And at the end of the day, what the architects say the design was, and maybe that was used as a particular number, I don't know, versus what the school committee allows because they know they have the legal right to do it, are different things, which is great, which is fine. But whatever, I think a clarifying statement, once everyone has knowledge of really what's going on, a clarifying statement from the school committee to the community of, here are the facts, and here is our policy. So that people don't sort of try to game the system. Because frankly, that's what I seem to think some parents tried to do last spring. So anyway, once I get some dates from Charlie and Dick, I will let you know, Mariah.
Charlie and Dan, right?
Dan,
Okay.
thank you. That's what I meant.
Talk about Driscoll, not Pierce. I just wanted to add on to this. Cliff and I talked, was it last weekend, Cliff? Not Thanksgiving weekend, but the prior weekend.
Yeah.
And I subsequently requested from Susan the list of classrooms that she knows of. She has this list of the classrooms that if you look at what I call the rainbow chart, which is the Excel one, that essentially has a maximum number of students, but it's not based on physical capacity of buildings. It's based on strictly on the number of teachers we have, the number of classes rather than classrooms we have. And so, for example, sort of to this point, you could have a classroom that in theory could be up to 25 students or a class, but the classroom itself doesn't accommodate 25 students. And there are certain spots, there's not a huge number of them, but there's certain spots where this comes up. And I think New Lincoln is the one building I've heard the most cited about this. And it'll be interesting to see. So Susan says she has a list. She went back to principals and said, give me the list of the classrooms you have, which can't run up to this number, so that we know that, because as they're doing enrollment projections, they don't want to say, oh, we can fit 26 kids in each one of these classrooms, when really the building itself can't accommodate that for that space. So she has the list. And I'll be curious about if it includes Driscoll, because while you're saying that he said this and that parents, made public statements, my understanding is that it's a little bit more nuanced in terms of, building safety and some other things. So it will be interesting to see. I don't know if you have Jonathan Levy's letter and what he said the basis was for 22, and if it was truly square footage or if it was the question about some of the other building security aspects. There's more reasons for it, I guess.
So I have a letter. I don't think it goes into that sort of detail, but I will double check and I will circulate it for everybody. But then it's going to raise a question, at least in my mind, which is that if the school committee has this policy, why aren't the buildings being built so that the policy can be met? I mean,
that is a great question. I will say we don't have a policy, and we are now in our first reading, because I was like, how could we not have a policy about this? Because it's sort of fundamental to the most cost-intensive aspect of our operation, which is class sizes. So we are now building it into policy because it never existed before.
But sorry, but even in the rainbow chart, there are class size guidelines and there are maximums there, and it is something the 20 up to 22 for K through 2 and up to 25 for the other grades has been stated publicly for so long that you can't say it's not a policy.
But here's the thing, Cliff. The policy that we've written says that it's subject to things like classroom size and other aspects, number of children on IEPs. It's not a hard and fast number that exists independent of any other factor or variable. And that's, I think, part of the reason this sort of conversation that we're having is one that needs, that's why it needs to actually be written down so that it can articulate some of the subtleties to how it's actually practiced as opposed to what people think it is.
So Maura, you said that this is being done now. Is that
Yep.
right? Okay.
We're in first reading of it, which means like it's gone to policy, it's gonna go to full school
Yeah.
committee next.
Next, and when? Like this month?
I don't do the scheduling for full school
I
committee,
know, I
so I
just-
don't know.
All right, well, we'll keep an
Soon.
eye out for it because I think
Yeah.
that's helpful. Dick, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. One observation is that it would be inexplicable to me that classrooms would be built to only hold 22 students, given the guidelines, the policy, whatever you call it. And I think I find it astounding if that would be the case. But obviously, this is something you have to dig into, and it also is something that I think has to involve the building commissioner and the building department, so that the implications of safety, code, and so forth are folded in as you do this. And it's an extension of what you've done, Cliff, but I think it is an issue if this is going to be pursued. Second point, in the short run, and if Sadaf, can you put up the rainbow chart?
The
My
one
name
with
is
the
now
details?
sticking with it.
With
The rainbow
the
chart.
Yeah,
March
I
6th.
know, I was like,
The
which one? They
so-called-
all are very colorful for the record.
Oh, yes. Well, the
Okay, hold on.
March 6th of 2025
Yeah,
chart.
that one, okay.
It seems to me that in the short run, thank you. In the short run, the question isn't what is the capacity of the schools. I think what Cliff is suggesting, for example, with respect to Driscoll, is that there are empty classrooms, and it appears that the schools, or at least some schools, may have been overbuilt. But I don't know that in the short run is going to help us with an override decision. It's a longer term question, the one that you're looking at, or it would factor into what you're looking into, Sadaf. But I think in the short run, it's not really an issue that anything will turn on, though I may be wrong on that. But what I'm looking at as I look at some of these numbers is, if you have very small classes, let's take Pierce. Sixth grade, there are 4 classes of 18. You could clearly, if my math is right, that works out to 72 kids. If those are the actual numbers now, or if you have similar situations to this, you could have 3 classes of 24 rather than 4 of 18. So in the short run, there are situations when you look at section size that it does suggest you could stay within the guidelines and perhaps reduce the number of sections.
Right, and I think if you look at this, so their average, so I actually don't know how this was all done, because it says that there's average, I think this is, let me just open this up, average, I don't know what that means, a typical average placement, but right now the average class size is only 17 for kindergarten. And then just going across here, even in the higher grades, your average class size is still in the 17 range, which is very small for like 5th and 6th, in my opinion. And so there, there's some opportunity there. I think the other thing from a space perspective, which we need to consider, and I had a good conversation with Karen Schmuckler last week, thank you, Murat, for making that introduction, is from a revenue generating perspective, because there is a real demand for therapeutic programs, it sounds like. So specifically, where those 6 Driscoll classrooms could be in play, so to speak, is to expand the Winthrop House program at the middle school level. And there is existing capacity in that program with current staffing. But there's potentially, if you were to open up an additional classroom or 2 and utilize it for that as a revenue generating opportunity, I think that is something that is potentially viable in the override time horizon as well. Given that that's an existing program, it would need to be expanded, but to tuition in for that particular program isn't the same amount of lift as it might be for for something else. So that is actually a relatively short-term viable
Okay.
option or use for those classrooms, interestingly enough. So we'll, I asked for some data from Karen right before the holiday. She said she would let me know when she thought that was going to be viable, but we had a good conversation. She said that the time horizon for some of these could be actually even potentially adding students in the next fiscal.
Okay. I have another point, but I see people have raised their
Yeah.
hands, so we can circle back.
Sure. So Mariah, go ahead. You raise first and then Cliff.
Thanks. 2 things I wanted to mention. One is the example that Dick gave about, oh, well, there's 4 sections in middle school for whatever grade. I just want to remind you that you still have to actually have people who are certified in each of the subjects teaching. And so you're limited in middle school, unlike general ed, which happens K through 5, 6 through 8 has a different teaching structure and different requirements from the state that limit. You might be able to maybe consolidate kids into 3 classrooms, but you still actually have to have 4 subject matter experts teaching. So it's a different way of staffing than what's happening down below, just to give you one thought. And then going back to the Driscoll classroom question, it boggles my mind too, Dick, that they would build the building to be the classrooms at smaller than what our actual guidelines have. And I'm not saying what Cliff has found is wrong, but I'll share that a piece of apocrypha that I heard after last year, but before Cliff just mentioned a letter, was that the 24 responds to room capacity of adults and not children, and that the number was higher for children because they're smaller. So I just think there's a lot of questions here, and I don't want us to, it's just interesting to me that it'll be very interesting to detangle if we ever get to the bottom of this, of what the actual, if someone decided to build a building that didn't meet our requirements, which I find so mind-boggling. I have a hard time thinking anyone would think that was appropriate. But if there's some other calculation behind there, I don't know. What I heard was it was adults and not children, and that there's a much higher capacity for children, but that the law requires occupancy to be based on the biggest humans.
Okay, just a quick response. I guess I don't understand how the teaching certification applies to the number of sections.
You need someone who's certified in English, math,
yeah.
science, and social studies. So that's four,
Okay, so you
four
have,
areas.
so you have, for example, 3 sections. I'm just looking at
some schools, they can puzzle it together with, for example, if
Yeah.
the math works out right, then you can have someone who's fractionally teaching 6th grade and some of 7th grade, and someone else who's fractionally teaching 7th grade and all of 8th
Exactly.
grade. So there's a way to
Exactly.
patch it together, but it depends on the number of sections, whether or not it actually works fully in the way we're thinking it could. And so it's sort of it's like a funky building by building exercise of how, and also keeping in mind that some of them might be a 0.8 FTE at that point, and then how that all comes together. So they might actually be a 0.8 FTE, but they're still represented as a full classroom. So again, it gets into like a lot of arcane requirements from the state and also what we think of as head count versus actual FTE.
Right, but I guess my point is that um, the fact that there are 4 subjects does not compel 4 sections.
No, but it
That-
makes it more complicated and it does tie us to, because we can't reduce it down to 3 if it doesn't allow us, if the staffing model doesn't allow for 3 experts. You have to really, I guess my point is it's not just as simple as saying, well, there's 18 students in 4 classrooms, we can consolidate that because there's a lot more behind the decision and the staffing and the certifications.
All right, Cliff?
Okay, so to pile on, particularly with Driscoll, given what was going on in town with respect to the continued increase of student population, it is a little mind-boggling. However, I will read you from this is from Mark Warner at Levi. The Driscoll School was designed for 22 students per classroom plus 2 staff, 24 occupants. This is much less than the building occupancy allows for a classroom of the size provided by IBC 1004.5. The classrooms, therefore, may accommodate some additional students per building code. And so that's sort of what I was just going over. I don't know why they designed it the way they did. There's clearly the legal capacity, capability to go larger. All I'm saying is that if you've got a policy and there's a discrepancy between it just really needs to be stated very clearly to the public for their understanding and frankly for your benefit and the benefit of the PSB. So anyway, the question I wanted to ask Mariah, and this is something that Sadaf asked me over the weekend. I did not have a really good answer for her other than to give her my view of history, is Old Lincoln. And, currently it's obviously being used, but, what is coming in the future in terms of its potential use? And obviously the question becomes, is there a better long-term use for that might actually provide efficiencies elsewhere? Or, if you're going to be bringing preschool into the buildings, does that mean you'll maybe be able to close the Lynch Center? And what might you be able to do with that as a standalone? So we aren't looking at any of that stuff. We should decide as a subcommittee whether we should look at any of it or whether or not we want to say anything about it. But I didn't want today to go by without me putting that one in front of you, Mariah, just for Sadaf's benefit and our own all consideration. So
I can't speak on behalf of the committee because we have not discussed the disposition of Old Lincoln at all, in my recollection.
Okay.
I wasn't necessarily thinking disposition in terms of sale, sort of like, an alternative use that.
Sure, but whatever would happen with it,
Whatever,
I don't
yeah,
have,
okay.
we have not talked about that at all. The only thing I would say that is on the horizon is the Baker renovation, which is theoretically parked for 2030. And so once Pierce is done, and so if Baker needs to be renovated and students need to go there, that is the next use of that building.
Yeah, I would add that Old Lincoln is a town building. I mean, it has been used by the schools, but it is, I think, ultimately for the town to decide its use.
I think all of the school buildings are town buildings and
Exactly.
they're
Yeah.
assigned to the school department as the agency of use. And I don't know if Old Lincoln has the school department as the using agency or not. But again, this is like a very speculative conversation that ties into a lot of other conversations around sort of key areas of town and real estate investment and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Okay. All right, I'd like to shift gears. Is there any other comments on the space analysis?
Yeah, could I just raise one point?
Sure.
This has really focused on the K-8 schools, and I think we've completely ignored high school class sizes, high school teaching loads. And I would think that there has to be a report out there that looks at the class sizes at the high school and the number of classes taught by each educator at the high school, so that
You all asked me to get the data and I requested it and the high school said they'll give it to me this week for minimum,
great,
maximum and average.
terrific,
So
terrific.
that data's
And-
coming. And when I reached out to MASC to ask them about the model, they pointed me towards DESE. They said, we don't collect data at that level, but DESE might. They connected me with the DESE contact, who's their data guru. I wrote to him last week again when I didn't hear back after a couple days. I got no response. I'll try again. I don't know if I'm going to get an answer, but I've been trying. But at least on our own internal data, I was told I'll have data this week.
Good. And I just have a quick related question for Anne. At what level does a town or school employee get what percentage of employment level do they get the full benefits? Is it 50% or less, more?
It's
What is the
50% or more, or 20 hours.
Okay.
So, obviously our AFSCME laboring employees work a 40-hour week. Whereas, admin staff works 37 and a half, libraries work 37. I don't know the specific hours for PSB, for the different BEU unions, or even the AFSCME subdivisions within that. But it is 50% or more. And, it isn't like they get prorated the amount of benefit they get. They get the full boat once they hit that 20-hour or 50% mark.
Okay. So I was curious, in light of your comments, Mariah, about people being 0.2, 0.6, whatever. And I don't know how many fall into each category, but given the benefit levels, it could have a significant impact. It could have very little impact. And I just raised that issue.
So let's shift gears. Oh,
Just the
please.
2.6s would, I presumably they would get full benefits, I would think, from what Anne just said. Is that correct?
That is correct. On the town side, we have, aside from seasonal, like rec employees and things like that, we have very few benefited part-time employees. You can probably count them on 2 hands total.
And on the school side?
That I don't know.
Okay. Is that information available?
It is. It's a little harder to calculate just because of how Munis works. It's all the 0.2s that need to be added together for some folks. And I think either Susan can get that or can work with Alvin on that. I just am not that familiar with the school side Munis layout to be able to do that easily. I think it would need to come from that side.
Okay. Great. The question just came up, Mariah, in light of the repeated references to 0.6, 0.8, employees. And I have no idea how many there are, what the financial implications are, but okay, thank you. We'll go from there.
All right, thanks, Doug. All right, so let's shift gears and look at the outline that Chaz had drafted. It's in the meeting materials. I'm happy to pull it up for discussion if that's helpful. People can see it. All right. All right. I know we reviewed it at the broader committee meeting a couple weeks ago. This is the PSB section. It kind of jumps into the budget specifically. And I think there was, Mariah, I think that your comment in the meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, was that you thought a lot of this would need to come from the PSB staff. I guess we have just a question. I mean, just taking a step back, we expect to see a multi-year forecast on Thursday at the school committee. We have a conversation scheduled for the 9th where we can ask questions. I'd like to look at this and make sure we think that this is the right information. I think there are sections that are missing from this. And I think we will need to refine this when we actually have recommendations that we put together. But I do think it's helpful for us to have a working draft that we can start tracking to as we get more information in the coming weeks, so that we can have an eye towards how this will come together as a report. So that's my objective here, is to identify any gaps and then talk about whether we would massage this. And then the other piece is that a lot of these sections around the summary of the existing budget, we don't have an owner to write those sections. So I'd like to talk about that as well. I'm happy to postpone that conversation until later if we think that's appropriate. Mariah.
Sorry, before I ask make my comment, what do you mean by summary of existing budget? You're talking about like A?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of the first,
right. I mean, a lot of this I think would come from staff. Like we already have some of A.
Yeah.
And probably B, but like, for example, all the mechanisms, some of this is already provided, but they need to at least review it. Like there's a lot of this documentation that's already there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And I think go ahead.
So I think, I'm happy to help sort of find this and start to put a skeleton into it. My question is, most of this that's here is quite orthogonal to where this committee has been spending a lot of its time. So how is the work that this committee and the time that the committee has been putting on, for example, the space utilization, or BEEP, or any of those, how does all of that fit into the model? And if it's the model that's outlined here, and if not, where do you see it going?
So I think that the things that are outside of the 3-year time horizon would go in the future section. Other opportunities for, this is phrased very much around town. I mean, actually, it has spatial utilization here as well. I think that this list is incomplete, but some of those things are in the future bucket. As far as revenue generated opportunities that I've been talking about, I think that goes, I think that goes in, there should be a section on incremental revenue opportunity.
You're in the town section. It's in the PSB section, you mean?
Okay,
like
Expenditure,
2F.
revenue, yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a couple of those, both between the out of district placements, plus the rental opportunities would go in here. And I think that A through E, as well as portions of F, I don't think we can dig into that until we've seen an actual forecast, right? And ask questions about it. So
exactly.
There isn't, and we're in this situation where we had to start working on things that have been questions that have been raised before we saw the forecasts come together. So that's what we're doing. And I think that we would need to modify this outline potentially to address the questions that we've been asking. So I don't see this as, hey, we have to shoehorn everything into this. I think this has a chunk of stuff that, like I said, we haven't actually looked at yet. and we won't until at least next week. And then I think we add the sections of here are the other opportunities that we looked at. Here are some of the questions that we've heard being asked from the community. Here's what we think might be additional opportunities. I think we have to think about how to craft that. So we'll modify that. And then the second piece, the core piece I think is missing here is just a baseline of what is the current fact base, right? What has been the tax growth? What has been people's ability to pay? Or what do we think people's ability to pay is? And surveys around what people value in town, right? We have to bring this together in a way that is more cohesive. And I think right now it's been very disjointed. And that is a little bit of my struggle with this as well, is that we've seen a bunch of information, we've talked about a bunch of things, and that's not reflected in this outline to date. And Mariah, I think this is the point you're making as well, right? This is very sort of tactical around the budget that we haven't seen yet.
So,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Okay.
Sadaf, were you in the other committee chairs talked to before this came out? Did you have any input into this design?
No, actually, ironically, I had started drafting an outline. Because I didn't know that that Chaz was going to draft this.
I think this is I think the word tactical is really a good one. It's sort of in many respects it's lacking any descriptive text, or I can't see descriptive text that's actually going to go along with some of this. And you know, the recommendations of reductions or revenue enhancements only coming from the PSB sort of negates the possibility of any group coming up with any particular ideas. And I don't quite understand why things have been written the way they have.
Yeah, and I think we can propose.
I wouldn't pay a lot of attention to this right now. I think this is going to evolve as Chaz gets feedback and maybe starts reading some of the stuff that we might come up with.
Okay.
But isn't
So
this
you're
the
suggesting
opportunity
that
to
we don't-
provide that feedback? Like, that's the point. We're sharing this now so that Sadaf can give it back as the committee's feedback to the.
Well, you know, he certainly got a lot of feedback at the full committee meeting last week or whenever it was before. I mean, a lot of feedback. So I am hopeful that he's going to take another cut at this. But sure, we should feed ideas into stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my preference is rather than let Chaz iterate on this, that we say this is how we think the PSV section will be written. That is my
Okay,
distinct preference. But I mean,
let me just add one thing that I haven't, talked about is that, Sarah introduced me to her next door neighbor who is involved with some youth sports activities here in town and has some ideas about building utilization and I guess overall facilities utilization. We had a long ranging conversation, and I'm going to be sitting down again with him. His name is Robert Kwok, and I've asked Chaz to sit down with us because I personally think this is not a discussion for the schools. I think it's a discussion for schools and rec in the town, and to take an approach that, sort of takes a step back and says, well, what do we want to accomplish in this broad area, and how might we be able to make things more efficient from a process perspective, and how do we optimize revenue, whether it's going to come from residents or non-resident users, because we currently have a lot of non-resident users who may or may not be the preferred folks we want. Who knows if they're paying us what they should be. So that's something else that this group is ultimately going to be talking about. I just don't have a timeline for it.
But
Yeah.
hold on a second. You're talking, first off, his name's not Robert Clock, it's Christopher Cook. Just as we so
No,
just if anyone's trying to,
it's Robert. I'm pretty sure it's
if you're talking about the same guy who I've talked with, who does who was
Robert
lacrosse,
Kwok. Robert Kwok.
it's not the same guy I'm thinking of?
KWAK.
Oh, then it's a totally different guy who also is involved in sports and rec and all these activities in town? Wow.
So that might be Robert's partner. I don't know. I know he has a partner that
Okay. Okay,
could be.
so I don't know if it's the same person or the same group or not, but I think that like we need to, I'm a little concerned about saying that we're gonna, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you said,
Okay.
but I guess I want to make sure that the building conversation that PSB is in like the middle of with rec is sort of the guiding, we're developing that as sort of a guiding tool for how town spaces can use, or town users can use the building spaces. I think that like there's a lot that goes into the shared space usage, right? So just assuming that like we can optimize things and that there's like underutilized spaces doesn't take into account classrooms working during the day. They may have materials spread out. You can't just take over the space, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I understand all that. I do. And I'm not making any particular suggestions. I really don't have an axe to grind here, or anything off the top of my head to offer. I know we looked at this back in 2014, and it's all going to be after hours stuff. Not interfering at all when school was, or for that matter, extended day was around. But it's not just school buildings. It's also the parks. It's also, Sewell. I mean, it's a broad conversation, and if there's overlap where it's going someplace that is already being covered by the MOU that apparently is gathering dust, then Chaz will certainly tell them that, right?
I mean, we don't govern how rec uses Sewell, that's for sure. That's
And
how
that's
Sewell uses
but
Sewell.
that's
Yeah.
part of the problem. That's part of that's why it is not just schools. It's schools, it's town, it's sort of everything needs to be taken a
Sure.
look at the same time.
Yeah, but I guess just understanding just differentiation of building use during the day affects
Yeah.
how all this works,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So coming back to the outline, I'm happy to try to take a crack at this. I'm gonna actually talk to Chaz to figure out if he was planning on iterating on this or if he was awaiting feedback from us. I had shared some feedback live during the conversation on sections that I thought were missing. My question to him will be, hey, we need to incorporate the areas that this group is looking at. In theory, you could put them under E and F, but these are very explicitly framed around the superintendent's suggestions. And so I think that is, that's where this ends up feeling a little wonky from my perspective. And I think, Cliff, this is what you were saying as well. And so this does require, I think, a revision. Are there additional things from this group? Because I can take a crack at how I think this might come together better and work with the other chairs on it, since I had already started doing an outline when Chaz published this, and make sure that I coordinate with Chaz.
Is this worth doing at this point?
Maybe,
Before
maybe it's not. I mean, I think it's a fair point. Maybe it's not. I guess what I was thinking, and maybe this is not reasonable, was that if we know where we're headed and everybody has their section assigned, there's some level of independent work we can do. I don't know. I guess we're already doing that. So maybe that doesn't get us a lot at this point. I'm happy to put a pin in this until.
It's certainly worth having a conversation with Chaz and saying what's lacking.
Yeah, I will send him some explicit feedback on this. And then I'm happy to table this until, end of
Yeah,
January.
because our work really is still evolving, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So Daf, I'm grateful for anything you do to coordinate with the other chairs, because I think to the extent that each of the three pieces follows at least where it makes sense, a similar sort of arc, that'll be helpful for readers.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay. All right, so there's one other thing that I wanted to chat about, which is actually two other things to chat about. The first is that we had talked about doing a follow-up to the CLA report, and we don't have an owner from our group to write that. There was supposed to be, I had understood originally, and the reason why we were waiting on this is that I had understood that PSB was going to share something in response to the CLA report in November. And it sounds like that's been delayed, or maybe that's coming at some later date, but I do think for the purposes of the report, we'll need to include something in here. And I think Bernard raised this as well. So I am happy to write this section. But I would need to sit down with somebody from PSB, Mariah, let's figure out who to.
I'm happy to figure that out with you.
Okay.
And I think that there's already resources in the terms of the signed MOU, and some of the other materials, like some of, I think Bella and Karen worked on a statement that was distributed about, CLA. There was another document that tied specifically to the allegations made about the IDEA grant and the DESI audit of the IDEA grant. So there's plenty of sort of primary material to work from.
Okay.
It just requires a little bit of pulling together, and I could ask Betsy if she doesn't mind just pulling together those.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. So I can work on that, and then I think we'll obviously everybody will get an opportunity to review that. Okay. And then the last thing, and I know it's 6:31, so we'll be quick about this, is I emailed this out. And I just want to run it by everybody. I revised the schedule again. Obviously we talked about space capacity. So we may need to do another turn of this. Next week on the 9th is the budget review. And just a reminder for everyone to send their questions to Mariah by end of day on Sunday, the 7th. And make sure you watch the school committee meeting on the 4th. So we come in prepared, and to make sure that meeting on the 9th is as effective as possible. The week of the 15th, so Jeff can't make the 15th. I was going to suggest that we meet at a different time that week so we don't lose another week right before the holidays. Are other people available on a different day that week? I was going to suggest Wednesday, because Tuesday is going to be that select board meeting where the budget is going to be covered. Can people do a Wednesday at 5, maybe?
Which Wednesday? Sorry.
Sorry, Wednesday, the 17th.
Of December?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Yeah. Okay. Sid, can you do that?
Let's see, I might be in clinic. Let me just. I could do that. Yes.
Okay, great. So we will move this to 12/17. Okay, great. So I will have Nicole update that. Mariah, have you down on the 5th for the zero-based budgeting and teaching loads? I know you're still chasing that down.
It's not going to happen for zero-based budgeting. Like that'll be like the very last thing that is able to happen depending on timing.
Okay.
Because we won't have enough data from PSB to be able to anchor it at that point.
Okay. All right. So I'll update that. And I'm actually unable to make that particular meeting. So I'll be looking for a volunteer to chair that. I'm hoping to share the middle school model, and Sid, you and I can talk about this on the 12th. Would hopefully be the target. And then the goal is to reschedule this meeting from the 19th, which is Martin Luther King Day, to later on in the week. and hopefully have enough data by then to do the out of district opportunity, revenue opportunity. So I'm waiting for some data from Karen on this. So hopefully I'll have that by then and I can ping her for a timeline. The 26th, the CLA response. And then the second would be additional topics and then synthesis and draft writing discussion. Does this make sense to everybody? This has us finalizing the document at the end of February.
But that'll give Sid enough time to write everything.
Don't listen to him, Sid.
Nick is such a talented writer too. All right. Any concerns? Any feedback? All right.
Now, could I, just a technical point, before you turn the recording on, we did approve the minutes
Yes,
from,
thank you.
from 11:10 and 11:17 unanimously, and I would just note that for the record.
Yes, thank you. Also for the record, we introduced Sid. Everybody did an introduction. And we did the roll as well. And nobody has left since then. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you for the reminder to update that for the recording. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
All right. Talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.